When Clint Eastwood sat down across from Jimmy Kimmel on live television, most people expected a lighthearted interview, maybe a few jokes about old westerns, a couple jabs about his age, and some polite laughter to wrap it all up. What they got instead was something no one saw coming. Because when Jimmy tried to turn the legendary actor into just another late-night punchline, Clint didn't flinch. He fired back. With wit sharper than any script and a calm that rattled the room, Eastwood flipped the interview on its head. And what happened next became late-night TV's most unforgettable lesson in quiet power. The lights were bright, too bright, the kind that made even the most polished guests squint under the pressure. Jimmy Kimmel Live was in full swing, cameras rolling, band jamming, audience fired up with that usual cocktail of caffeine and late-night sarcasm. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, cue cards in hand, already grinning like he knew something no one else did. "Tonight," he said, drawing out the moment, "we've got a very special guest, a true icon, a man who's made more people flinch with a squint than most actors do with an entire monologue." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Jimmy glanced sideways at the camera. "Please welcome Mr. Clint Eastwood." The audience exploded. Some stood, some just stared. The applause wasn't the usual Hollywood cheer, it carried weight. Clint walked onto the stage like he was walking into a saloon. Calm, slow, measured. No flash, no fake smile, just presence. Dressed in a plain black jacket, his silver hair catching the lights, he shook Jimmy's hand with the same grip that once made movie villains think twice. Jimmy kept smiling, but there was something behind it. A flicker. He'd prepared for this. He had jokes lined up. About age, about politics, about how the world had moved on from grit and guns. This was supposed to be a playful roast, light teasing, viral clips. Clint sat down like he didn't care what clip they used. The audience was ready for fun, maybe even a little chaos. They'd seen politicians squirm, actors fumble, celebrities caught off guard. That's what Jimmy did. He was clever, quick, relatable, the king of knowing smirks. But Clint Eastwood wasn't a politician. He wasn't here to sell a movie or win over the Twitter crowd. He was here because someone asked him to show up, and he did. What no one knew, not the audience, not the producers, not even Jimmy, was that this wouldn't be an interview. It would be a reminder of a time when men didn't talk just to hear their own voice, of a time when a look could say more than a monologue, and of a man who hadn't lost a step, just patience. Jimmy started light, but there was bait in his smile. "Clint, you've been in this business a long time," he said, letting the crowd giggle at the obvious. "From the Wild West to directing Oscar winners, do you ever miss the days when the good guys didn't have Twitter accounts?" The audience laughed. Clint didn't. Jimmy pushed on. "I mean, let's be honest, Hollywood's evolved, right? These days, our heroes go to therapy, apologize publicly, and write memoirs about their mistakes. Not exactly Dirty Harry material." Another laugh. A few claps. Jimmy leaned in like he'd landed something clever. Clint just looked at him. That look, calm, cold, calculated, the kind that used to make movie theaters go silent before a shootout. Jimmy chuckled nervously. "You still with me, Clint?" Finally, Clint blinked. Slowly. Then he leaned forward, rested his forearms on his thighs, and spoke without raising his voice. "Funny thing about evolving," he said. "You can walk in circles and still call it progress." Silence. A few people let out a surprised laugh, not sure if they were supposed to. Jimmy's grin faltered. Clint wasn't done. Back then, a man didn't need applause to know he was right. He just needed to sleep at night. He leaned back, calm as ever. "Try that sometime." The room cracked, half applause, half shock. Jimmy adjusted his cards, reaching for the next bit. But the tone had shifted. This wasn't a laugh track moment. This was real. "You ever think your characters were too angry?" Jimmy asked, trying to reset. "Too masculine?" Clint looked over. "You ever think your jokes are too soft?" he asked. No smile, no wink. Just a question that hit harder than a punchline. The crowd erupted. Even the band couldn't help but react. Jimmy leaned back, hands raised in mock surrender, but it was clear he'd lost the rhythm. This wasn't a roast anymore. It was a reckoning, and the man sitting across from him wasn't a relic. He was a reminder that some people don't evolve to please the crowd. They endure, because they don't need permission to be who they are. They already know. Jimmy shifted in his seat, still trying to steer the ship back into familiar waters. "You know, Clint, it's wild. Your characters used to settle things with a 6-shooter. These days, people settle things with hashtags." A pause for laughs, though I guess cancel culture would have had a hard time with the man with no name. The crowd chuckled. Jimmy smirked, pleased with the line. He turned toward Clint like he was expecting a slow, tired nod, maybe even a polite chuckle. Instead, Clint took a slow sip of water, set the glass down, and said deadpan, "At least my characters finished what they started." The room broke. It wasn't just laughter, it was that raw, involuntary kind of laughter that spills out before your brain catches up, the kind that makes camera operators shake behind the lens. Even the band let out a few whoops. Jimmy tried to laugh, but it came out a little tight, a little late. He adjusted his jacket, blinked, and muttered, "Okay, wow." Clint didn't smile, didn't flinch, just sat there, calm as ever, like he hadn't just leveled the tone of the entire show with one sentence. Jimmy tried to regain footing. All right. I walked into that one," he said, chuckling through the discomfort. "You've still got that quick draw." Clint shrugged. "Sometimes silence is the fastest trigger." Another ripple of laughter. Another glance from Jimmy toward the audience, trying to figure out if they were still on his side. But the shift was clear. This wasn't the usual dance anymore. The audience wasn't here for late-night banter. They were watching something else now, something real. Clint reached for his water again, slow and unbothered, like he was sitting on a porch, not in front of millions. Jimmy glanced at the next card in his stack. For the first time all night, he looked unsure of which one to read. And Clint, he just sat there, completely still, like a storm that didn't need thunder to make itself known. Jimmy regrouped. He glanced at the crowd, then back at Clint, and leaned in slightly. His voice softened, shifting away from punchlines into something that sounded like curiosity, though everyone could hear the edge. "Clint, you've spoken a lot about values, discipline, toughness, accountability. Do you ever feel like the world's moved on from that?" Clint didn't answer right away. He looked at Jimmy, then down at the floor, then back again. "Depends what you mean by moved on," he said. "If you mean traded grit for comfort, maybe. If you mean we stopped telling boys to be strong and started telling them to be liked, yeah, we moved." The laughter was gone now. The audience wasn't clapping. They were listening. Jimmy nodded, but there was a flicker in his eyes. He knew he'd just triggered something deeper. "But isn't that part of growth?" he asked. "I mean, we're in a more emotionally aware culture now. Less John Wayne, more vulnerability." Clint leaned forward slightly, elbows on the armrest, voice steady. "There's nothing wrong with feeling things. Problem is people think toughness and feeling can't live in the same house. But they do, always have. What changed is we stopped valuing the people who keep standing when things fall apart." Jimmy blinked. Clint kept going. "Resilience ain't outdated. It's just uncomfortable. It doesn't trend. It doesn't go viral. But it's what keeps the lights on. It's what gets a family through a bad year. It's what builds and rebuilds when everything breaks." The room was quiet, not awkward quiet. Weight of the moment quiet, the kind where you don't even hear phones buzzing. Jimmy tried to interject, but his words came out slow. "So, you don't think we're progressing?" Clint shook his head. "I think people confuse noise with growth. Talking louder doesn't mean you're saying something better, and tearing down a wall doesn't mean you built anything in its place." A woman in the crowd clapped once, then more followed. Not wild applause, something slower, respectful. Jimmy leaned back in his chair, quiet for a beat. Clint just looked at him, not smug, not superior, just steady, like a man who'd seen storms come and go and never needed to shout to prove he could weather them. Jimmy crossed his legs, trying to regain rhythm. The audience had gotten quiet, not bored, just alert, like they were watching something important without knowing exactly why. So he went back to what he knew. Comedy, light jabs, something that might pull the crowd back to his side. He smiled, leaned in. "Clint, I gotta ask, how do you feel knowing most people under 30 know you as the get-off-my-lawn guy?" The audience chuckled. It was a soft dig, wrapped in nostalgia. "I mean, I'm half expecting you to pull out a shotgun and yell at my interns." Laughter. Clint didn't move, just stared for a second. Let the line hang in the air like a cigarette in a silent saloon. Then, without changing expression, he said, "I don't yell at people to get off my lawn, Jimmy. I wait till they step on it and charge rent." The room detonated. People weren't just laughing. They were howling, clapping. A guy in the second row stood up. A woman near the front turned to someone beside her and mouthed, "Oh my God." Phones flew up in the air, screens glowing, recording, not because it was funny, but because it was something else. That rare combination of perfectly timed, perfectly delivered, and completely unexpected. Jimmy tried to laugh, but it cracked. His eyebrows raised like he hadn't seen it coming. "Okay," he said, pointing. "That's good. That's real good." But the momentum was gone. Clint had it, without raising his voice, without standing up, without even blinking too much. He had it. Backstage, a producer muttered into a headset, "Clip that." Now, that's the moment. Within seconds, someone in the crowd posted it. A 5-second video, low quality, shaky hands, but clear enough. Clint Eastwood just roasted Jimmy Kimmel into the floor. The caption? Simple. Legend. The likes started pouring in before the segment was even over. And Clint? He sat back, took another sip of water, like nothing had happened at all. Jimmy adjusted his cards, shuffling more than reading now. His rhythm was off. The crowd wasn't laughing like they used to. They were watching Clint, listening to him. Jimmy knew that look. They weren't waiting for the next joke. They were waiting for the next truth. So he tried a pivot, something lighter, something flattering. "Let's talk directing," he said, voice calm. "You've made some incredible films, serious stuff. But I gotta ask, do you think that old school style still works today? I mean, audiences now, they want something different, right? Faster, louder, maybe more inclusive?" Clint didn't blink, didn't frown, just sat forward slightly, fingers clasped. "Storytelling hasn't changed, Jimmy, just the people telling the stories." Jimmy nodded, unsure whether to smile or brace. Clint continued. "Old Hollywood wasn't perfect, but it knew what a story was. Beginning, middle, end. A character who struggled, who changed, who mattered. Now, people chase moments, not meaning. Clicks instead of clarity." The audience was dead silent. "I've made quiet films, slow ones, with characters that don't always explain themselves. You know why?" He looked at Jimmy. "Because real life doesn't come with narration." The crowd didn't clap, not yet. They were too busy processing. Jimmy swallowed. "But don't you think culture's just evolved? That the way we consume stories now, short form, viral, bite-sized, that's just where things are going?" Clint tilted his head. "You ever see a tree grow in a minute?" Jimmy blinked. "What?" "A tree," Clint repeated. "You plant it, water it, wait. Years go by. It becomes something strong. Now try printing one on a t-shirt and calling it a forest." The crowd started clapping, slow, rising. A few whistles. People nodding. Not at a punchline, but at a picture they hadn't considered before. Clint leaned back. People forgot that just because something's loud doesn't mean it's saying anything. Jimmy looked down at his cards. They suddenly felt very, very quiet. The applause wasn't planned. It didn't wait for a punchline or a signal from the flashing applause sign overhead. It just happened. In the middle of Clint's sentence, soft-spoken, deliberate, and more honest than most people were used to hearing on late-night TV. Clint had just finished saying, "If your values only matter when people agree with them, they're not values, they're branding." A single clap echoed from the back, then another, and another, until the whole room was applauding, not out of politeness, but out of something deeper. Recognition. A murmur of approval ran through the crowd, heads nodding, hands clapping, even a few quiet dams whispered under breath. Jimmy shifted in his chair. He smiled, but it didn't hit his eyes the same way. His fingers tapped the edge of his cue cards, once, twice, then stopped. He glanced off stage, where a producer was frozen mid-step, headset tilted, like he wasn't sure if he should cut to commercial. Jimmy looked back at Clint. "Well, I guess you've still got it," he said, voice light, but a little off-key. Clint gave a small shrug. "Never thought I lost it, just wasn't shouting about it." The crowd laughed, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't laughter at someone, it was laughter with someone. There was a difference, and everyone in the room felt it. Even a few crew members exchanged glances near the back. One whispered to the other, "This isn't going how they thought it would." The camera operator nodded, still filming. Jimmy tried to continue, fumbled the next line, cleared his throat and laughed to cover it. "All right, let's move on," he started, but the crowd wasn't with him anymore. Their eyes were still locked on Clint, calm, still, unbothered. The man hadn't raised his voice once, hadn't cracked a wide smile, hadn't thrown a single insult. But somehow, without trying, he was now holding the entire room in the palm of his hand. The clip hit Twitter before the end credits rolled. Shaky phone footage, shot from the third row. Clint Eastwood, stone-faced, delivering the line that started it all. "You can call it outdated, or you can call it working. Either way, it raised better men than tweets ever will." Within an hour, it had 100,000 views. By morning, millions. Hashtags exploded. Eastwoodounds, Kimmel, Legend Speaks Truth, The Chair Strikes Back. Reaction videos poured in, some laughing, some stunned, some just replaying the same 5-second clip over and over, adding slow-motion effects and dramatic music like it was a Marvel movie finale. People couldn't stop talking about it. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. He said what everyone's been thinking. This is the death of late-night TV as we know it. Kimmel got Clint rolled. Others pushed back. Just another dinosaur refusing to evolve. Tired, recycled machismo? We don't need more strong, silent types. We need emotional intelligence. But it didn't matter which side people landed on because they were talking, debating, sharing. Memes exploded across Instagram. Clint photoshopped onto a throne made of cue cards. Jimmy edited into a cowboy duel, dropping his mic like a six-shooter. News outlets picked it up. Clint Eastwood sparks culture war on late-night stage. Kimmel faces backlash. After Eastwood interview goes off script. Pundits debated it on morning shows. Podcasts broke down the subtext like it was a lost Hemingway novel. Even celebrities jumped in. Some praised Clint. That's how you handle a loaded question with class and calm. Others criticized him. Being old doesn't automatically make you wise. And through it all, Clint said nothing. No tweet, no statement, no follow-up. He didn't have to, because the clip was already doing all the talking, and for once, the internet wasn't laughing at someone, it was listening to someone. The next night, Jimmy walked out to his usual applause, but this time, there was something different in the way he adjusted his tie, paused before delivering his monologue, glanced at the crowd like they were in on a secret he hadn't quite processed yet. He grinned, trying to keep it light. "So? I got Eastwooded," he said. The audience laughed. Some clapped. A few shouted, "You did?" Jimmy held up his hands in mock surrender. "Listen, I knew Clint was sharp. I just didn't know he was still sniper-level sharp. He rolled a clip, the viral one, the rent line, the lawn joke, the tree metaphor. It played behind him on the big screen as he stood in front of it like a man at his own roast. When it ended, the crowd laughed again, but it wasn't the same laugh as usual. It was respect-laced, earned. Jimmy turned back to the camera, the smirk fading just enough to let something real peek through. "Here's the thing," he said. "People come on this show, and yeah, we have fun. We poke a little. We dance around topics. But Clint? He didn't dance. He sat there and just spoke." He paused, let it breathe. "And yeah," he added, "he made me look like a middle school debate kid trying to take on a war hero." Laughter. But it didn't erase the sincerity in his eyes. "Look, I don't agree with everything he said," Jimmy admitted, "but I respect the hell out of how he said it. Calm, clear, no buzzwords, no yelling, just Clint being Clint." The audience clapped. This time for Jimmy maybe, but mostly still for the man who wasn't even there. Jimmy nodded toward the screen one more time. "So, Mr. Eastwood, if you're watching, next time, I'm bringing backup." It was a joke, but he meant every word. A week later, a small outlet in Carmel by the Sea, quiet little town, quiet little paper, ran an interview that somehow said more than all the trending headlines ever could. A young reporter, nervous but steady, sat across from Clint Eastwood in a modest chair inside a sunlit room that smelled faintly of coffee and old leather. No lights, no audience, no pressure, just questions. She asked him about the moment, the interview, the millions of views, the hashtags, the noise. Clint shrugged. "I wasn't trying to go viral," he said. "Didn't even know I had until my daughter texted me a meme." She smiled, asked the follow-up, "What do you think made it resonate so much?" He looked out the window, then back at her. "I just said what I meant," he replied, simple as that. "And maybe people miss that kind of thing these days." That was it. No mic drop, no ego, just honesty, sitting still in a world that doesn't know how to anymore. The clip made its way online later that day. No edits, no music, just Clint, speaking softly in a quiet room. And people listened all over again, not because he shouted, not because he played to a side, but because he reminded everyone what conviction sounds like when it's not packaged, polished, or put on display, just real. The final frame of the video faded to black with a line that didn't need explanation. In a world full of punchlines, sometimes the quietest voice makes the loudest impact. And just like that, the moment wasn't a moment anymore. It was something else, a legacy. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.